In 1949, my father retreated to Taiwan with his troops from the mainland. He had a group of sworn brothers who shared life and death with him. These young brothers came from various parts of the mainland and often appeared in our home. Stories of these veterans often surfaced in my mind, and I wanted to record them. Yes, I must write because only I know their stories. Among them were three: Uncle Shu, Uncle He, and Uncle Chen, who had the closest relationship with our family as I grew up. I considered them family. Let me first share the story of an old soldier who loved to hum tunes, Uncle Shu. It was a sunny afternoon, and the neighbors were leisurely cooling off in the shade. I sat in a rattan chair at the door of our house, reminiscing about my childhood. Uncle Shu often came to our house, and he loved to hum his favorite old songs like Lovers by the Lake, Willing to Marry a Han Man, and Spring at West Lake. Whenever he hummed, I could always feel his longing for love.
Xiaowen, do you know? These old songs accompany me through the toughest years.
Uncle Shu's voice was always filled with warmth.
Uncle Shu, what was your life like before?
I asked curiously.
Alas, when I was young, I went through all kinds of hardships. It's hard to explain in a few words.
He smiled and began to tell his story. Uncle Shu recalled his childhood life in the countryside of Hunan. At that time, his family lived in a small mountain village, and they made a living by farming. One night, bandits broke into the village and stole the villagers' belongings. Uncle Shu's grandmother tried to stop them but was forcibly taken away by several bandits. The next morning, the family found her body wrapped in a straw mat, thrown at their doorstep. That scene was deeply etched in Uncle Shu's mind, teaching him about the harshness of life and the cruelty of human nature from a young age. In 1949, the mainland was engulfed in war, and the entire country was plunged into unprecedented turmoil. Uncle Shu, my father, and a group of comrades in arms had to leave their hometown and flee with the troops. They took their families and embarked on an unknown journey of escape. Typically, women and children could ride in vehicles, but the men had to walk. Overnight, they would cover more than 100 miles, their feet covered in blisters. Every step was filled with hardship and pain, but they had to grit their teeth and persevere to survive. Along the way, they feared that someone might fall behind. At every resting place, they would leave notes on bulletin boards with information on missing persons or their whereabouts. These bulletin boards were filled with names of lost loved ones and search information, every word revealing a mix of despair and hope. Uncle Shu witnessed countless tragedies: lost children crying alone, frail elderly people collapsing by the roadside, unable to continue. In their group, people would occasionally fall due to exhaustion and never get up again. Every time he saw such scenes, Uncle Shu's heart felt like it was being cut with a knife. But he knew that only by continuing to move forward could they hope to survive. In such adversity, they still supported and encouraged each other. Uncle Shu often walked to the back of the group to make sure no one was left behind. He took on more responsibility and burden with his own shoulders, becoming a spiritual pillar for everyone. One night, they took a short rest in a small village. Uncle Shu saw a little girl squatting by the roadside, tears streaming down her cheeks. He walked over and gently asked,
Little girl, where are your family?
The little girl choked back her sobs and said, I got separated from my parents, and I can't find them. Heartbroken, Uncle Shu picked her up and comforted her.
Don't be afraid, we'll find your parents.
He brought the girl into the group, letting her stay with the other children, and instructed everyone to keep an eye out for her parents. Then he posted a notice on the bulletin board, indicating that the girl would travel with the troop to the next stop. Miraculously, the little girl's, I called her Sister Yuan, parents found her at the next stop. Everyone was overjoyed. After arriving in Taiwan, Sister Yuan and her parents became good friends with our family. Finally, one night, they boarded a ship to Taiwan. As the ship slowly departed from the mainland, Uncle Shu stood at the stern, looking at the receding homeland with mixed feelings. He knew that this might be a permanent farewell, but he still held on to the hope of returning home.
At that time, people were in a state of panic. We didn't even know if we would make it to Taiwan alive.
Uncle Shu recalled.
I and your father's group were like grasshoppers tied together, jumping to this new place called Taiwan.
Despite this, Uncle Shu always worried about his relatives and friends left on the mainland, especially his very beautiful girlfriend, Zhang Wei. She was his one and only Wei in Chinese, and in the chaos of fleeing in 1949, they lost each other. Although he missed her deeply, she became an untouchable memory. During their escape, they faced great survival challenges. One day, they couldn't find any food in the wilderness, and everyone was starving. Suddenly, Uncle Shu suggested,
Why don't we become bandits in the mountains?
My mother, who was already several months pregnant, was terrified and quickly said, No! No! How can we flee from communist bandits only to become bandits ourselves? Uncle Shu laughed and said nothing more. That night, he somehow brought back some food and immediately offered it to my mother, his sister-in-law.
Uncle Shu, how did you get that food?
I asked curiously. He smiled mysteriously and said,
That's a secret, Xiaowen. But the important thing is, we made it through.
He didn't tell the truth, but my mother later told me that Uncle Shu had risked his life to steal some food from a nearby village. Once, they encountered a group of men who were recruiting soldiers. These fierce-looking men were specifically capturing young men for the army. Uncle Shu was terrified and didn't know how to avoid these menacing people. My mother, thinking quickly, held my newborn sister in her arms and immediately knelt down, crying, Please have mercy, our child was just born, please spare him. Seeing the newborn baby in my mother's arms and the pale, slender Uncle Shu trembling beside her, the bandit leader turned and spared him.
Your mother is a brave woman. She saved my life.
Uncle Shu said emotionally. Because of my mother's cleverness that saved him, from that moment, Uncle Shu became my eldest sister's godfather and later, the godfather of all us children. After arriving in Taiwan, my father settled in Tainan and worked at a nearby military hospital, while Uncle Shu started his new life and later became the deputy director of a military hospital in Jiayi. Despite leaving his homeland, Uncle Shu remained concerned about his relatives and friends on the mainland.
Our whole lives, we've been thinking about going back one day, to see our loved ones again.
Uncle Shu said, with a trace of sadness in his eyes. My mother arranged several matchmaking meetings for Uncle Shu, hoping he would find a suitable partner. The first match was a Miss Golden Gate with a gold tooth, whom Uncle Shu didn't fancy. The second was a gentle Taiwanese girl named Kai Xiuji, who was quiet, with long hair, much prettier than Miss Golden Gate.
She quite liked me, but I couldn't let go of the one from the mainland.
Uncle Shu shook his head helplessly.
I never forgot her, even though I knew the chances of seeing her again were slim.
After each failed matchmaking attempt, he would silently smoke in his room, his eyes filled with endless sorrow. He could never forget his one and only, the woman named Wei Only You in Chinese. When I was 5, Uncle Shu took me to Jiayi for 2 months. For the first 2 days, we stayed in his dormitory. Every morning, we would eat white steamed buns and drink thick soy milk with the others. One day, as he hummed a song, holding my hand, we walked on the hospital lawn. When we reached the entrance, Uncle Shu stopped to greet the young, handsome guard standing there. The guard saw me, immediately crouched down, and said,
What a cute little girl.
Then he suddenly gave me a peck on the lips. I was so angry that I kept wiping my mouth, making the 2 men laugh heartily. Later, Uncle Shu took me to stay at the home of Mrs. Li, who lived next to the hospital. Mrs. Li had 2 children, Feng Feng, who was my age, and Xiao Mao, who was a year younger. During those 2 months, the 3 of us played together all day, picking green olives on the mountain, catching butterflies, having a great time. Uncle Shu often took us shopping. He liked to buy matching floral dresses for me and Feng Feng, making us look like twins. One evening during dinner, Xiao Mao suddenly slapped my face, shocking us. Mrs. Li immediately asked Xiao Mao.
Xiao Mao, why did you hit her?
Xiao Mao replied,
Oh, there was a big mosquito on her face.
Making me not sure if I should laugh or cry. After living in Taiwan for more than 10 years, Uncle Yu finally married a sweet Taiwanese girl. That year, Uncle Shu took me along to attend Uncle Yu's wedding. The banquet was almost entirely filled with old soldiers who had retreated to Taiwan from the mainland. A group of brothers got drunk and decided to play mahjong all night. Uncle Shu arranged for me to sleep in the bride's room next door. During the night, I got up to go to the bathroom, but was too scared to sleep alone, so I went to find Uncle Shu. They were playing mahjong, reminiscing, and laughing continuously. Seeing that I was unwilling to leave, Uncle Shu arranged for me to sleep on a long sofa next to him. He took the bride's soft, deep red velvet cloak for me to use as a blanket. Soon, I fell asleep peacefully. When I was in the 2nd grade, my father's career hit a setback, and our family fell into severe financial difficulties. My mother decided to take me to Jiayi to seek help from Uncle Shu. It was a hot summer day when we arrived in Jiayi and found Uncle Shu at work. "Your big brother is in trouble, and we have no money," my mother said bluntly. Without a second thought, Uncle Shu took out a wad of cash from his pocket and handed it to my mother.
If this is not enough, I have some bonds I can sell,
he said. Uncle Shu's generosity helped our family get through that difficult period. When I was in the 5th grade, my parents divorced due to some misunderstandings. This was a huge blow to our family. When Uncle Shu found out, he was shocked and angry.
How could you not tell me about something so major?
He said, his eyes filled with anger.
If I had been there, I wouldn't have let you divorce.
Uncle Shu even tried to save my parents' marriage. He took me to meet with Uncle Ma, my mother's new husband, in a park, hoping to convince him to let my mother return to us. But Uncle Ma firmly stated,
"I am a Catholic, and divorce is not allowed."
With the situation settled, Uncle Shu had no choice but to accept reality and take me back home. Uncle Ma, however, did not let us down and took care of my mother for his whole life. Although my father's career gradually improved, that setback had taken away his ambition and confidence. Uncle Shu visited us every year, bringing clothes, watches, and some pocket money.
You must take good care of yourselves. I will always support you,
Uncle Shu said. Every time we met, he would tell us stories about his experiences on the mainland and the people and events he could never forget. The gifts he brought were always thoughtful. Once, he brought a beautiful military coat for my father. When my father tried it on, he looked refreshed, as if he had returned to his youth. Uncle Shu laughed and said,
"Look, this is how you looked when you were young, so handsome."
We children always received small gifts from him, such as a watch, new clothes, some pocket money, and once, I even received a bicycle. These gifts were not just material things but also a symbol of his care and love for us. In 1996, while I was living abroad with my family, my mother told me that Uncle Shu was ill. I hurried to go see him, but before I could leave, he passed away due to stomach illness. Hearing this news filled me with endless regret.
Uncle Shu, you spent your whole life helping us. We will never forget you,
I said silently in my heart. At Uncle Shu's funeral, our whole family attended. My mother told me that Uncle Shu had no children, so his close friends hired a fake son to mourn and send him off. Everyone prayed silently before his spirit, reminiscing about the times we spent with him. Although his life was full of hardships, he left us with endless emotions and memories through his selfless love and resilient spirit. After the funeral, my mother took out an old photo. It was a picture of Uncle Shu when he was young, standing with a group of young, handsome men in Kuomintang army uniforms, their faces full of confidence and hope. My mother pointed to the people in the photo, introducing them to me one by one. "This is your father, this is Uncle Shu, this is Uncle He, and this is Uncle Chen." At that moment, I felt as if I had traveled back to that era filled with passion and dreams, experiencing the resilience and courage of their generation. This is the story of my beloved Uncle Shu. I will always cherish his memory. I hope you enjoyed this story. Next time, I will tell the story of another veteran who loved to eat dog meat, Uncle He. Remember to like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.